Hey everyone, I'm back with another video. Um, so I've actually been reading the third edition of this book. There is a fourth edition. So I'm gonna be reading the fourth edition here on out. But just so you know, the fourth edition, it he added just a little. He didn't take anything out, but he added like a few pages, so it's just a little bit different, but it's very, very similar. Like I looked through both of them, and it's very similar. But you guys should read the book. Like I know you're listening to this, but you should also read the book again, because you'll there's more. Like you might not get everything the first time, but I'm gonna read the end of chapter 3, and then from where we left off, and then I'm gonna continue with the book. We are about a little more than halfway through it, um, or about halfway. But all right, looking at all these groups of foods, I will conclude this part of this subject by saying that it is possible to live on a diet which includes some of each of these groups in its daily routine. That it is possible to live on group 1, milk and its products alone, that it is also possible to live on all the rest, excluding milk and animal products entirely, and relying chiefly on 2, 3, and 6, cereals, dried fruits, and nuts for the necessary albumin, that it is not possible to live on 4 and 5, garden vegetables and fruits alone, and generally in this country not on 6 dried fruits alone. Okay, I just want to, I don't, gonna try not to stop too much this time, but he says it's not possible to live on garden vegetables and fruits alone. I would say it's possible to live on them, but you're not going to be healthy. You know, you're going to be way under your energy requirements, your albumin requirements. So you won't be thriving. You know, you'll be surviving. But to say that it's not possible to live, I don't agree. I don't necessarily agree. I mean, you'll be unhealthy, but you might live, because there's people out there doing it, but they don't look so good. Um, Sorry, I'm going to continue. The point about uric acid is to swallow as little of it as possible, and by this means I have reduced my own uric acid turnover from about 20 grams per day to a little over 10 grams per day, with the result that I am now practically free from the diseases under which I formerly suffered. The point as to uric acid free foods is to choose those which suit you best and to take the proper quantity, and this may be almost condensed into 3 words. Live on bread, for bread and cereal are those which best suit the majority. Chapter 4. Values of foods in albumin and urea. Quantities required, diet of training, and athletics. In considering the values of foods and the quantities required, and in apportioning these into special diets, it will be convenient to treat of diets according as they are required for ordinary conditions of life, for special training and exercise, or for the treatment of slight departures from normal health, such as obesity and some minor alterations of function. We have already seen in chapter I that the body weight in pounds multiplied by 9, chapter 1, multiplied by 9 gives the minimum amount of albumins required for a sedentary life, and by 10 or 10.5 those required for an active life, such as that of an outdoor laborer. And if we take an active man of 140 pounds and apply these rules, we find that he will require 1,400 grains of albumin per day, which will produce about 466 grains of urea per day when completely digested and metabolized. With regard to urea, I may say that the percentages of albumin values to be given in the diet tables that follow have been found by me from practical trial to be very close to the truth. For though on a weighed diet continued from day to day, urea will be one day below and another above the quantity calculated from the albumin values of those foods. When taken over days or weeks, these fluctuations tend to balance each other, and over such a period, the urea calculated from the albumins generally comes very close indeed to the urea found. These fluctuations no doubt arise from variations in the time of digestion of the foods used, as the digestion and absorption of a food taken one day is not necessarily concluded in time for the 24 hours division of the urine. And then again, when albumins have been absorbed, they may, as we have seen reason to believe, remain either in the blood or the tissues as a reserve of force till a special call for force production and activity is made. See Figure 1 and remarks upon it, also uric acid, page 335. But when allowance is made for these causes of variation, the values to be given are, I believe, quite sufficiently accurate for our practical purposes. Now, the albumins required for this man of 140 pounds can be got from 10 ounces of bread, 8% of albumins, 2 ounces of oatmeal, 12%, 8% of albumins, 34 grams per ounce, 340 grains. So the 10 ounces of bread, 340 grains. That's the 340 grains is the important number, I think. 2 ounces of oatmeal, 104 grains. 2 pints of milk, 525 grains. 1.5 ounces of cheese, 210 grains. 1 ounces of nuts, 68 grains. 19 ounces of fruit and vegetables, 153 grains, equaling 1,400. All right, guys. So as you can see, that's a good amount of food right there. I mean, and that's for one day. Okay. So he says for one day, for a 140-pound man, 10 ounces of bread. That's like, I'm pretty sure a loaf of bread is like 2 ounces. Let me check. How many ounces? In a slice of bread. Yeah, 1 ounce. One slice of bread is 1 ounce. So, guys, he's saying 10 slices of bread in one day, 2 ounces of oatmeal, 2 pints of milk, 1.5 ounces of cheese. That's not that much cheese. It's really not that much cheese. But it's like a little bit of cheese, you know. 1 ounces of nuts and 19 ounces of fruits and vegetables. That 19 ounces, that's a lot. And that's for a 140-pound man. So guys, I think people, pretty much everyone, not everyone, but I think a lot of people are underestimating their needs. You know, their energy needs to be truly thriving, like to be truly to have the optimum amount of energy for their weight and, you know, activity level, age, you know, all that stuff. But I think it's really interesting, you know, because a lot of these foods don't have that much albumins, you know, but they add bulk to the diet. All right. Now, it is obvious that such a diet list may be varied greatly in very many directions, and that such variations may be used as temporary changes or permanent diets, according to taste, habits, cost, facility for preparation, and other concomitant conditions. For those who do not do well on or like much fluid, the milk can be reduced to 1 pint per day if the cheese is increased to 3.5 ounces. Others, again, may be able to increase bread or breadstuffs to 16 ounces, which would just about enable them to reduce the milk to 1 pint, or cut out the cheese entirely, and some may take still more bread up to 24 ounces. Those who do not like or cannot digest nuts in any form or of any kind may leave them out. slightly increasing the bread, milk, or cheese, or replacing them by about 3 times their quantity, 3 ounces of dried fruit. I will just mention that almonds are to be obtained at all times, and that pounded almonds can also be obtained and made into cakes or biscuits, which are much liked and form a favorite top dressing for many cakes. Chestnut flour can also be obtained and added to cereals or made into bread with some of them. Nuts have the further advantages common to many substances that leave undigested residues of tending to prevent or relieve constipation in other people. However, they again, in common with other undigested particles, may cause some intestinal irritation, which may give rise to papular and other slight skin eruptions. And I would here refer to what I have already said about indigestible substances on page 17, for in some people nuts may relieve dyspepsia by putting an end to the constipation to which it was due. On the other hand, if given to people who have suffered from gouty or other intestinal irritation with or without diarrhea, they may increase the irritation and intensify its evil effects, such as malnutrition and anemia, and pave the way for still more terrible enemies such as tubercle. Others, again, may be able to increase bread, biscuits, and puddings, and thus arrive at a diet in which there is no milk or cheese at all, as Table 2, 11 ounces of bread, 12 ounces of biscuit, 2 ounces of rice, 4 ounces of macaroni, 2 ounces of oatmeal, 10 ounces of potatoes, 11 ounces of fruits. Yeah, that's a lot of food. That's a lot of food right there. And that's for a 140-pound man. I mean, it's not that much, but it's a good amount. Like they're going to be big meals, with a lot of food. Exactly, and that's what he said. This is a bulky diet, much too bulky for those accustomed to a concentrated meat diet. But when they take Table 1 as a transition stage, nearly everyone will be able to arrive at Table 2, as they will probably find that as they give up milk and cheese, their power of eating breadstuffs increases. So guys, I've been following this diet for about a year now. I feel really good on it. Like, my endurance is way better. And my mood is better. I'm sleeping better. Everything. I mean, I'm all about it, But I will say I'm still on Table 1. I eat a lot of pizza. And because for me, like, I mean, maybe eventually I'll get to Table 2 where I'm eating less of the cheese, But it's already like like you said, going from a meat diet to this, it's a bit of a transition. And yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of convenience also, But he's not saying Table 2 is necessarily better, although he says that he eats like Table 2. He eats mostly breadstuffs, he says. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, so I hadn't mentioned that before, like what I'm doing. But yeah, sorry. Alright, this breadstuff diet is one which gives very great variety in foods, for there are many kinds of breads, almost endless kinds of biscuits, and for the rice, macaroni, and oatmeal can be substituted a long list of various meals and pudding stuffs. See previous remarks about breads, page 51. In every change of diet, then, we must see that the new food is sufficient in quantity and satisfactorily digested by the individual in question, and this can only be done by making diet alterations very slowly, one meal at a time, and watching and testing the digestibility of each new foodstuff as it comes to be used. For this purpose, I am in the habit of advising that only one meal should be altered at a time, and that each meal should be watched for, say, 7, 10, or 14 days, and regarded as quite satisfactory both as to quantity, quality, digestibility, and resulting strength and power for work before the next meal is taken in hand. Thus, first stage, give up tea, coffee, and meat soups. Replace by milk, milk and water, soups made with milk, etc. Second stage, alter breakfast. Leave out bacon, egg, or fish. Replace by an increase of porridge, toast, biscuits, and breadstuffs, and half to 3/4 of a pint of milk. Third stage, alter lunch. Leave out fish and meat. Replace by an increase of toast, biscuits, breadstuffs, and puddings, half a pint of milk, and 1 ounce of cheese. Fourth stage, alter dinner. Leave out fish and meat. Replace by an increase of toast, biscuits, breadstuffs, and puddings, a cheese dish, and half a pint of milk. Follow the scheme out stage by stage, making each stage complete and satisfactory before the next stage is begun. Okay, guys, so he recommends milk, to a lot, and cheese, but you might be wondering, should the milk and cheese be pasteurized? Does he recommend raw milk? Does he recommend pasteurized milk? And he actually talks about this in his main book, Uric Acid, which I've talked about. But he says that you want to have pasteurized milk and pasteurized cheese. That's what he recommends. And where difficulties are met with, one food after another should be tried and tested till the best results are obtained. And no matter how slowly they have to go, beginners must always refuse to move the second foot till the first is firmly planted. In cases where it is of extreme importance that there shall be no failure of strength and nutrition on the new diet, as, for instance, where there is either tubercle in the family or its onset appears to threaten the individual in question, it is well to take the precaution of estimating the urea of a few days on the old ordinary diet, and then to supply albumin on the new diet in accordance with the results obtained. Thus, if the average excretion of urea on 4, 5, or 6 days, either consecutive or taken at random, is 450 grains, then we must supply 450 times 3 equals 1,350 grains of albumin per day on the new diet. But if the patient has had a bad appetite on the old diet, so that the average urea is below the physiological level of 3 or 3.5 grains per pound of body weight per day, then we must go by the body weight, giving a physiological allowance of urea and albumin, and not by the urea found. But if tubercle is actually present and feeding up is indicated, then far more than the physiological allowance of albumins should be given, and the patient can be stuffed with food to any extent that is possible, as 4 pints of milk, 16 ounces of breadstuffs, and 4 ounces of cheese in many shapes and forms, with butter and cream ad lib. And it is certainly no harder to overfeed a patient on this diet than on one of flesh. Indeed, it is often much easier and, as I have said in uric acid, much less dangerous. So what he's saying is somebody has tuberculosis, he recommends to eat a lot more of these foods. And he talks about it, I'm pretty sure in the other book, or maybe this one later on, but he says that the reason why you want to do that is because when you eat a lot more, then you're like adding fire to the metabolism. Like it will burn really strong, and it'll burn up the. His theory is that the reason why is it'll like. Maybe he'll talk about it because I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think the reason why is because, like, when you eat a lot more, you're like. Will have more energy to deal with the disease. I forgot what he said. Like to burn the microbe, maybe. I forgot what he said actually. but I think that's what he said. Then again, the total bulk of the diet may be greatly diminished by substituting gluten or protein for some of the bread, or by adding gluten to some of the bread or cereal foods, or by taking a bread such as Hovis, which contains a larger percentage of albumin than ordinary bread. Thus, Table 3. 5 ounces of Hovis bread, 2 ounces of oatmeal, 1 ounce of gluten, 1 pint of milk, 2.5 ounces of cheese. Yeah, I don't really even know what Hovis bread is. But it's like that bread from Lord of the Rings in the Two Towers. You know, when they just take a little nibble and it fills them up like as a whole meal. But nah, I don't know what it is. But obviously it's some kind of more dense, like has a higher percentage of albumin in that kind of bread. A further modification of such a diet, and one that is sometimes convenient, if only because it entails almost no labor for preparation and cooking, is one consisting of milk and cheese, fruit and vegetables. Thus, 2.5 ounces of cheese, 3 pints of milk, 15 ounces of potatoes, 16 ounces of fruit. I may say that I took the above diet of cheese, milk, potatoes, and fruit for 4 or 5 months with very good results, and should recommend it for those who suffer from dyspepsia when on cereal foods and bread, or as a change from these. It is convenient for those who desire for a time, either at home or while traveling, to be almost independent of cooking, as except for the potatoes, and occasionally a little stewed fruit, almost no cooking is required, and raw fresh fruit can be substituted for potatoes and cooked fruit if necessary. It is also a diet that does pretty well for children, who are often fond of fruit and vegetables, and as these would only rarely require more than some 1,200 grains of albumin, the cheese could be reduced to 1 ounce or less in their case. Some may be able to take more than the above quantities of potatoes and fruit, and then the milk may be somewhat reduced, as 3 pints is rather a large quantity of fluid, especially in cold weather and for those who are sedentary. My own experience is that I can take 2.5 or even 3 pints of milk quite well in summer, especially if not sedentary, but 2 pints are quite enough in winter and when sedentary. Others, again, may be able to take more than 2.5 ounces of cheese and can reduce the milk while increasing the cheese, and those who get on well with nuts or dried fruits can considerably reduce either cheese or milk, replacing them by one or both of these as mentioned with regard to Table 1. Such are some of the chief modifications of the diet, but it is obvious that it can be altered in an almost endless variety of ways, and those to whom few foods come amiss and who have good digestion can have a different diet, or at least a considerable change of food every week throughout the year. There are some people, however, who do not take kindly to any of these foods, and who are in a very poor way feeble and dyspeptic. With these, any of the above modifications of diet may be difficult, and for a time even impossible. They cannot drink milk, or they greatly dislike it. They cannot digest cheese, and they can eat but little bread. And so on through the whole list. There is practically nothing but meat, fish, and eggs which they can eat, and they have but a poor appetite even for these. With these people it is best, I think, to improve the general health and get up an appetite by tonics and change of air before altering the food at all. And the meals, if too frequent, may be spaced and reduced to 3, 2, or even 1 in the day. Or in some cases, food may be altogether withheld for some days till there is a decided appetite, as recommended by Dr. Dewey, previous reference, and then when there is a good appetite for ordinary foods, some of the flesh food of the old diet may be gradually replaced by equivalent value in milk, cheese, or bread, and 1 meal at a time may be changed, with more or less interval between the changes as may be required. But to put it But to put a debilitated and dyspeptic patient suddenly onto a diet which is not relished and may not be digested is, I think, at best rash and may even be somewhat dangerous. I believe that with care, patience, and determination, these initial difficulties can generally be overcome, especially when the fear of serious or painful disease furnishes some vim a tergo. But even in those who get over these initial difficulties, dyspepsia may now and then cause some more or less decided trouble, and I shall there mention shortly what have appeared to me the chief causes of this. Too much albumin, especially in the form of milk and cheese, to which the patient is not accustomed. Bread is a better and more reliable food, and its bulk generally prevents its being taken in too large a quantity. Too great bulk of food, fruit and vegetables, especially in those accustomed to such foods of small bulk as meat, fish, and eggs. For this trouble food may be reduced, at least for a time, to little besides milk, cheese, and bread stuffs, the more nourishing and important foods, and vegetables and fruit should be taken only after these have been provided for and in quite small quantities. Too much fluid. It should, I think, be a rule with all who go on to these diets never to drink when not thirsty, for those who do so tend to get a dilute and watery condition of the blood, and this entails a more or less dilute and watery condition of the digestive secretions poured out from the blood. Such dilute digestive secretions will act slowly and inefficiently, and more or less fermentation and putrefaction will, meanwhile, be going on in the food masses, resulting in the formation of gases, acids, and decomposition products. Okay, so that part I think is really interesting, where he says, don't have too much fluid, because that's like nobody says that, in the modern times, Like there's this book I was reading written by these 3 PhD scientists. One of them was like from Poland and like another from a different country, and they all collaborated and wrote this like long book about hydration in athletics. And they were saying like for a normal active male who's like weighs like 160, something like this is like a rough estimate, but you get the gist. Someone like around that weight needs around a gallon of water, and they recommend it should be like mixed with sodium, so that it can get into the cells. But and this is a modern book, it just came out like in the past few years. But he's saying no. He's saying no. You don't want to drink that much because it's gonna dilute the blood, and then the digestive secretions will be diluted, and then fermentation will occur. It's really interesting. Guys, I honestly don't know which one's right, but for me personally, I've experimented with drinking a lot of fluid, and I would say I need like, and I'm like very active. Like I'm playing tennis, soccer every day, like running, like, I'm very, very active. I feel like I need like around like 2 liters, maybe a little less per day to feel okay. But he doesn't really say, like he says too much fluid. So how much is too much, right? So he doesn't really talk about the exact amount. I mean, he actually did say 3 liters of milk was a lot of fluid. So I guess he's saying that more than 3 liters is too much. That's basically what he said, right? But I think this part's really interesting. I think he's right. I do. But I will say that I don't think it's always good to just wait till you're thirsty. But I mean, the other book talks about this too. But I think he's right. I don't think, I think a gallon is too much, guys. I really do. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm gonna continue. But guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Such dilute digestive secretions will act slowly and inefficiently, and more or less fermentation. Oh, I already read this. Too much sloppy and pultaceous food, especially starchy food. This I have already referred to and pointed out the importance of taking starchy foods as dry as possible, for if such foods are sodden with fluid, the salivary digestive secretion obviously cannot very easily get into contact with its starchy particles, or can only do so slowly and after more or less dilution. And it is certainly a fact that, under some conditions, the stopping of bread and milk, porridge, and milky puddings, and their replacement by toast, biscuits, and oat cake, eaten dry or with a little butter, the milk being taken only apart from or after them, may make all the difference between troublesome flatulent dyspepsia, distension, and discomfort, and their absence. And it is for these reasons, fear of too much fluid in the blood or too much sloppy, starchy food, that it is often advisable not to take more milk than 2 pints in the day, especially in cold weather and when sedentary, and also not to mix that milk with starchy foods into slops and porridges and puddings. And those who suffer from flatulent dyspepsia should carefully bear these points in mind. There is no harm in drinking when thirsty, for thirst means that the blood is concentrated and in want of fluid, and nature will not ask for more than she wants, but there may be great harm in taking fluid by rule or order and apart from thirst. And it may even make all the difference between success and failure with the diet. Yes, that's what he's saying. I mean, guys, this guy's not playing around, you know? He's not playing around. He knows what he's talking about, guys. On a meat diet, it may be necessary to drink considerable quantities of fluid to wash out the poison, though I have mentioned in uric acid some facts which throw considerable doubt on its utility. But when uric acid is not swallowed, it is unnecessary to wash it out, and to take excess of fluid not only causes dyspepsia, as above mentioned, but may raise the blood pressure, making all high blood pressure diseases worse, and even dilating the heart as well as the stomach. So yes, he's saying when you're eating meat, you need more fluid, and I think this part's really interesting because, at least in my experience, when I eat meat, I do get more thirsty. I don't know about you guys, but I get more thirsty when I'm eating meat. So that is interesting. And even dilating the heart as well as the stomach. In fact, I regard the washing out idea as one of the most harmful and unphysiological suggestions ever made in clinical medicine. The water practically never increases the elimination of uric acid, but it frequently and greatly increases the circulation trouble and suffering. Deficient mastification, especially in the case of breadstuffs, which are largely digested by mixing with the saliva, is an undoubted cause of some dyspepsia, and Mr. Horace Fletcher has suggested, in an interesting little book, Gluten or Epicure, that we should all gain by masticating our food till it ceases to taste, swallowing more or less unconsciously the fluid parts and rejecting those hard parts that become tasteless before they are fluid. There is undoubtedly sound physiology behind this suggestion, and though I see no proof that it has as yet enabled anyone to live on less than the physiological allowance of albumins, I believe it does something to cheat the intestinal microbes and thus lessen intestinal putrefaction and diminish the odor of these feces, thus rendering digestion more complete and efficient. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think people tend to not chew their food enough, and they pride themselves on like finishing their meal quickly, for some reason. But I definitely think that, I mean, that just makes sense to me. You want to chew your food well. I mean, it could also choke on your food if you don't chew it enough. But he's saying to really chew it. Too frequent food. It is a remarkable fact that those who take meat require to be fed more frequently than those who live largely on cereals, and it is due, as I already mentioned, to the fact that meat is a stimulant and is quickly digested, absorbed, and worked off, while cereal food is more slowly assimilated and gives off over a series of hours a constant steady supply of albumin, force, and urea. But on giving up meat, the frequent feeding need not be continued, and those who attempt to continue it will be more liable to dyspepsia than those who are content with 2 or at most 3 meals a day. I frequently see people who take as many as 6 to 7 meals in the 24 hours, that is to say, they take 3 or 4 chief meals and 2 or 3 intermediate meals of milk, etc. between these. They learn this habit on the old diet, and they continue it on the new under the impression that they must eat and drink a great deal to keep their strength up, but the common result of their efforts is dyspepsia and debility. Another cause of dyspepsia with milk may undoubtedly be the preservatives mixed with it. These may have but little influence when it is only taken in small quantity in tea, and yet may produce more or less serious effects in those who take it in the larger quantities advised in the tables of this book. So he's saying preservatives mixed with milk. So what I've noticed with the milk you buy these days is it always has vitamin D. And the reason, I think they started doing that in like the 1950s or 60s. I'm not sure, like a while ago. And the reason is they wanted to prevent kids from getting rickets, which is like a bone, like where their bones are all feeble and they don't grow and stuff. But besides the vitamin D, I mean, I don't think they're mixing the milk with anything these days. I don't think he's talking about vitamin D right there. But it is interesting, what if I don't want vitamin D in my milk, What if I want my milk, what if I get vitamin D from other things and I want milk without vitamin D, It's kind of messed up how all the milk, if you look on the label of all the milk, it's all has added vitamin D. What if like I just said, what if I'm already getting enough vitamin D and I don't want extra vitamin D? It's like, but anyway, sorry. Little rant there. I have made some experiments with borax myself, and the utmost dose I could take, even for a short time, without producing symptoms of gastrointestinal dyspepsia, was 30 grains in the day. I should therefore advise those who can eliminate the other causes of dyspepsia, and yet find their dyspepsia associated with milk or other foods with which preservatives are known to be mixed, to make a special effort to obtain these foods free from such preservatives, and see whether the symptoms then subside. In all these diets, butter and oil may be freely taken with cereals and vegetables. They are merely left out of the tables because they contain no albumin or nitrogen, but these and the starches are very amply provided for in the diets. Yeah, so, everyone thinks, butter and oil are going to give you a lot of energy, But he's saying that they actually have no albumins in them. So it's not, and oil has the highest amount of calories per like, what's the word? Like, it's like this, like a small amount of oil has the most amount of calories compared to like any other food, right? Everyone thinks, oh, it's all about the calories, but he's saying no, it's about the albumins in the food, the nitrogen. So I think that's really interesting. Um, it is, I think, common experience that butter and oil can be much more freely taken on a meat-free diet than on one containing flesh, and it is at least probable that the evil influence of uric acid in the blood, hindering, as it does, circulation, digestion, and metabolism and combustion, has something to do with this, and certainly the digestive, hepatic, and other disturbances that accompany bilious attacks and sick headaches are due to the circulation effects of uric acid. Though the action of these substances in the production of force is probably indirect and for the most part unimportant, they are amply provided for in the diets, and the assimilation and metabolism of fat is distinctly facilitated when it forms part of a uric acid-free diet. I may note in passing that the diet of milk, cheese, potatoes, and fruit is that which of all others seem to best keep the urine clear and free from deposits of urates or red sand, and this was no doubt due to the amount of alkali in the potatoes and of similar salts in the fruit, as well as to the absence from milk and cheese of salts such as those contained in meat and cereals, which tend to raise the acidity of the urine. Thus I have pointed out in uric acid that the ratio of the acid excreted in the urine to the urea excreted at the same time is, on a diet containing some fish and eggs, 1 grain of acid to 6.3 grains of urea, while on a diet such as that in tables 1 and 2 it is 1 to 7, or between 1.7 and 1.8, and on a diet such as that in table 4 it tends to be about 1 and 9, or between 1 and 9, and 1 and 10, and with this the urine is generally quite clear. It will be understood from what I have said in uric acid that this is not so much a matter of the quantity of uric acid excreted as of its solubility in the urine after excretion, though no doubt both are affected by acidity, and a deposit of red sand in the urine is the index of a deficient rather than, as is so commonly supposed, of excessive excretion from the body. That is interesting. But it may be of some interest to those who are worried about such deposits in the urine of their patients to know that by such diet as the above, which diminishes the relative acidity of the urine, they can be prevented. Those also who are very sedentary should be careful, especially in cold weather, to take no more albumins than are really required for strength and nutrition, as acidity rises with urea, and under these conditions it may suffice for a time if body weight is multiplied by 8 in place of 9, with reference to the relatively high acidity of the urine with the diets in tables 1 and 2. I think that some part of this must be credited to the bread and cereal foods, which are well represented in these tables, but are completely absent in table 4. And if we look at the analysis of a cereal such as barley, we find that it appears to contain a considerable excess of acids. Thus I see that the ash of barley contains 34.9% of potash, soda, lime, and magnesia, and 61.6% of phosphoric, sulfuric, and soluble silicic acids, and if wheat and oats have any similar excess, this will easily account for the relatively high acidity of the urine on the diets of which they form a part. These cereals often tend decidedly to raise the acidity of the urine, and when taken in quantity over a length of time, especially in cold weather, they may not only raise the acidity of the urine, but also diminish the alkalinity of the blood. Hence, they may tend to cause some retention of uric acid in the body, and acting with the other causes may even lead towards gout and rheumatism. Thus, horses suffer considerably from rheumatism, probably when given too much dry cereal and too little fresh vegetable, and they are very often greatly exposed to cold and wet, and all these things tend to diminish the alkalinity of blood. And arthritis, both in men and horses, can be treated by increasing the alkalinity of the blood, and keeping it up, and this may be done by eating vegetables that contain alkali, such as potatoes, and by diminishing the albumin's taken until they are within the physiological limits. For diminution of albumins diminishes the formation of acids in the body, and it is the overfed, both among children and horses, that suffer most from rheumatism. It is not as fond and foolish mothers so often imagine, that they must be fed up. A little wholesome starvation with plenty of vegetables is much more likely to prevent the dreaded disease. But most children that suffer are poisoned with uric acid containing foods, in addition to being overfed, and horses in hard exercise often get from 2 to 4 pounds of beans a day, which means an introduction of from 30 to 60 grains of xanthan. With reference to pulses, peas, beans, and lentils, it will have been noticed that now they are not mentioned in the tables of foods, and this is due to the fact, of which I have given full details in uric acid, page 764 and figure 75, that I found that they actually contain even more xanthan than many kinds of animal flesh, and are, therefore, like flesh and alkaloid-containing vegetable substances, such as asparagus and mushrooms, to be regarded as poisonous. I should now, therefore, be inclined to consider that the rheumatism met with among the vegetarian natives of India is not so much due, as I previously suggested, both to excess of cereals with deficiency of fresh fruits and vegetables, and exposure to cold at night, etc., as in the case of horses, though no doubt all these things have some contributory effects, but rather to direct and considerable introduction of uric acid or xanthan in the pulse foods, which so many natives use to a large extent. Yeah, guys, like, everyone thinks beans are super healthy, you know? So, he's saying no. He's saying they're even worse than meat, like I was saying in my second video. And he said don't eat peas, beans, lentils, don't eat mushrooms, don't eat asparagus. Everyone thinks asparagus is the healthiest food, you know? And I believe it will turn out on investigation that in those parts of India where rice and fresh vegetable substances form the staple foods, not only rheumatism but uric acid diseases generally are but little known, whereas in those parts where pulses are very largely consumed, they are common, almost universal. I have recently been shown, much to my astonishment, a passage in Human Physiology by J. H. Raymond, W. B. Saunders, London, page 128, in which he quotes from Dr. Alanis, a vegetarian, the assertion that a vegetarian diet causes atheromatoous degeneration of the arteries. In the passage referred to, some very sweeping conclusions are drawn from very obscure premises. The teaching of pathology shows, I believe, quite clearly that atheroma of the vessels is always associated with pressure and strain, and of late years I have come to regard uric acid as at least the chief cause of such vascular pressure and strain. Now, in the quotation above mentioned, vegetable foods are spoken of in the mass, and no attempt is made to distinguish between such useful foods as the breadstuffs and such deadly poisons as the pulses, so that it is at least open to us to suspect that the terrible results recorded and credited most loosely and inaccurately to vegetarian foods in general are really due to the uric acid contained in the pulses, mushrooms, asparagus, tea, coffee, etc., which are still constantly taken by almost all vegetarians. Yeah, guys, like, I agree, you know? Because as he's saying, like, all these vegetarians, they're eating all this poisonous stuff, which is even worse than meat. Has even more purines in the food than the meat. And then also another reason why I think a lot of vegans fail is because, again, they eat these foods like peas, beans, lentils. And also they eat whole wheat. They think whole wheat's good, which he says is don't eat whole wheat. And they eat mushrooms. A lot of like the mock meat is made out of mushroom. And they eat all the bad foods, you know. And also on top of that, the vegans, they eat the bad foods, and then they also don't eat enough of the foods that have the albumins in them. So they're not getting enough energy, and they're eating all these foods that are poisonous, you know? So it's no wonder that most people are unhealthy when they're vegan. In one passage, however, it is said that the naval surgeon Tralee has seen numerous cases of atheromatous degeneration in Bombay and Calcutta, where many people live exclusively on rice. I believe a careful investigation would show that there are really no such people, for my inquiries point to the probability that all natives of these places add onto their rice other vegetables, and only too often the cheap and poisonous dal. And in my own experience, some of the most terrible cases of high blood pressure and vascular degeneration I have ever seen have been in dal-consuming natives of these Indian provinces. The suggestion also given in the above quotation that vegetable foods cause chalky degeneration of the arteries by introducing mineral salts into the blood is one of the most puerile bits of physiology it has ever been my lot to meet with. How terrible, then, must be the fate of those who pay frequent visits to the mineral spas of Europe, especially to those, too numerous to mention, which are rich in lime salts. I must, however, refer those interested in these points to a forthcoming new edition of uric acid, as this is not a work on pathology, but bread eaters have, in my opinion, no reason to frighten themselves over any such physiology. A similar investigation in Australia and New Zealand would, I believe, trace to the excessive use of flesh and tea an equally long array of serious or deadly diseases and an almost equal number of mental or moral defects, which only a complete reversal of their present diet will render visible by contrast. Alright, and here he's showing a diagram of the different teeth, like the teeth of a leopard compared to a man and an orangutan. Figure 6. Teeth of a carnivore, a man and a frugivore for comparison. In this country, also, I should attribute to the poisons of flesh and tea the all-pervading anemia, which, as seen in London, cannot be due to want of oxygen, as I have pointed out that it is equally to be seen in country towns of only half a mile radius. In the same way, many mental and moral obliquities are no doubt due to the obstructed circulation of poor blood loaded with these poisons. See uric acid, page 500 and 782. Figure 7. Photograph of the impressions made by the same teeth on a piece of modeling wax. I'm going to continue. Sorry, I'm going to read that again. In this country, also, I should attribute to the poisons of flesh and tea the all-pervading anemia, which, as seen in London, cannot be due to want of oxygen, as I have pointed out that it is equally to be seen in country towns of only a half a mile radius. In the same way, many mental and moral obliquities are no doubt due to the obstructed circulation of poor blood loaded with these poisons. Yeah, so he's saying, this isn't just about strength and endurance. This is probably equally as importantly about mental and moral, your mental health and your moral obliquities, Like I was saying in the last video, people eat these foods, these foods that have these poisons, and they get depressed. They get depressed. He talks about it later on in the book, or maybe in the other one, I can't remember, but he says, even if you know this to be true, even if you know that if you eat these foods, like peas, beans, meat, whole grains and mushrooms, all the bad tea, coffee, all these bad foods, even if you know they're going to cause the depression, it has such a powerful effect on the physiology that even if you know this to be true, it will still cause the depression. You will still be depressed. I mean, look, you might not be, but it's very powerful. He talks about it later on, I think. But these diseases have crept over us so gradually that we quite fail to recognize the full extent of our loss. And even in my own case, I should formally have said that, apart from headaches, I had good mental and bodily health on meat and tea, because I knew no better. But I should now say that I have in both directions 50% better health without them. I have so often been asked about the structure of man's teeth in relation to his diet, and such great and widespread ignorance of comparative anatomy has been shown by the questioners, that I now give two figures which I shall leave to speak for themselves to a large extent. Figure 6 shows that the crown of the carnivorous tooth is a knife edge, while that of the frugivorous tooth is a surface. And figure 7 shows the impression which each set of teeth makes on a piece of modeling wax, and here again we see that the carnivore's impression is a cut or gash, the dark central parts of the impression, one being the deep incisions made by the cutting edges and points of one in figure 6, while that of the frugivore is a print or impression like that of a seal or stamp. I have also referred in Uric Acid, page 82, to the difference between a man and a carnivore with regard to the relation between the excretion of acids and of urea in the urine, and from the facts there given, it is evident that the metabolism of man differs very widely indeed from that of a carnivore. And if we may draw any conclusion from this difference, it might be inferred that man would be much more likely to get gout and rheumatism from eating meat than the carnivore would from eating his natural food. In a word, man has been provided neither with the teeth to cut flesh, nor with the power to hold its poisonous salts in solution and pass them out of his body, and the carnivore has been provided with these powers to a very considerable extent. Then, if man imagines that a few centuries, or even a few hundred centuries of meat-eating in defiance of nature have endowed him with any new powers, except, perhaps, those of bearing the resulting disease, suffering, and degradation with an ignorance and a fatal apathy which are truly appalling, he is deceiving himself, for the record of the teeth shows that his structure has remained unaltered over vast periods of time. For the benefit of some who may see mountains of difficulty in minute points, I will now give an outline of a day's food on the above diet. Alright, but guys, I just want to talk about what he was just talking about the teeth and the metabolism of man, how we're not carnivores and everything. Because I know a lot of you meat eaters watching this are going to disagree, I went through a period of time in my life where I thought I was a carnivore, or at least an omnivore, and that I was designed to eat meat. My body was designed to eat meat. There's a lot of misinformation out there. You can go on YouTube and find it about how humans are carnivores, and guys, it's not true. I mean, we're not carnivores. I mean, to me, it's so obvious now. But I don't want to get into it too much. But yeah, anyway. I'm going to go back one line. For the benefit of some who may see mountains of difficulty in minute points, I will now give an outline of a day's food on the above diet. For those in good health, 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner are ample. Some even do better with a light breakfast or none, this latter course being specially indicated where there is little or no appetite for a morning meal. See Dr. Dewey's works, referred to in Chapter 1. I may say also that simple food of not more than 2 or 3 kinds at one meal is another great secret of health, and if this seems harsh to those whose day is at present divided between contemplating, preparing their food, and eating it, I am afraid I must be still more unkind, and ask them to consider seriously whether such a life is not the acme of selfish meanness. And in case they should ever be at a loss what to do with the time and money thus saved from feasting and preparing to feast, I would point on the one hand to the mass of unrelieved destitution, ignorance, sorrow, and suffering, and on the other to the doors of literature, science, and art, which stand ever open to those fortunate enough to have time to investigate them, and from none of these, as they are still in their infancy, need any turn aside from want of new kingdoms to conquer. In any case, the best of health, strength, and nutrition are not to be obtained by waste of time and money on elaborate food, when the simplest things are all that are really required and accepted by nature. If we take then Table 1, breakfast, before which an hour or an hour and a half's work, if possible in the fresh air, is no drawback, may well consist of oatmeal 2 ounces, cooked in the form of porridge, with half to 3/4 or 1 pint of milk, and this may be followed by some toast or bread, 2 to 3 ounces, and butter with marmalade or jam. These are the staple foods of the breakfast, and should be taken first, and if when they have been consumed some appetite still remains, any fresh fruit or dried fruit in winter may be taken. I should say, however, that those who are especially anxious to have a free excretion of uric acid and not to retain any of this substance in their body should not take much acid fruit at breakfast, or should divide their attention between acid fruits and potatoes, which contain much alkali, so that the alkali may more or less balance the acid. For those who have not to be specially anxious about excretion, and who do not suffer from any active gout or rheumatism, fruit at breakfast is probably not harmful and acts as a slight tonic and stimulant. As variations of this diet, bread and milk may be substituted for porridge, the oatmeal may be taken as oatcakes and scones, or any other cereal of equivalent nutrition value and quantity may be substituted for it in any desired form. Thus it may be possible to have a new kind of cereal every morning of the week, or even every morning of the month. These are all homely foods, to be found in nearly every household or nearly every baker's shop, and their cooking therefore presents no insuperable difficulties. Guys, I'm gonna stop this video. Yeah, let me know what you think.